Okay, so the production line, here we go. So what I meant by the title, the production line, is meaning work. So we live in a society that is super successful in survival. Like we're very successful in survival. Most of us don't know death until it's the death of our parents or death of our grandparents, but we see it very rarely. In younger years, it gets more as you get older, but most people don't know death that well. We have an amazing setup in our society. I mean, it's amazing that we get water. We can, not too expensive, we can buy water. We get it pumped to our house. We have sewage. There's so many things that make our life so easy. The washing machine, that really makes your life easy. The dishwasher, you don't really think about it, but it really makes your life a lot easier. The lawnmower, I mean, if you didn't have a lawnmower, you'd have to do all that by hand. I had to do a tiny patch of grass by hand the other day because I couldn't get the fly mower to work. And it's really hard work. Like planting vegetables, keeping livestock, killing animals. Like we buy into this society that's already set up to us, and the internet, computers, it's got so many amazing qualities to it. But it also has this quality where we're indoctrinated to work. Not as bad as some countries. If you're from somewhere like Japan, I think that's more intense, or Asia. But it's put into us from such an early age that the meaning of our life is working hard. We're not conscious of it. And there are other meanings they put in there as well, but this is the predominant meaning. So when I was a kid, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people that have come from Western countries, it was very much like, what are you going to be when you're older? And there was a lot of pressure around work and getting a job and being successful. And you were very much guided away from anything that was too artistic and more things that were more practical in society. Not everybody, but a lot of people. My parents were very sweet. I mean, they tried to guide me towards it, but they also had a sense they wanted me to be happy. Which I accomplished. So we're taught from such a young age that what's important is to work hard and produce money and be successful in the production line. Like, we're not taught that happiness is important. We're taught that happiness comes from being successful in the production line. And everything is about production, producing something. Even if it's about kids, because even if you have kids, what you're doing is you're breeding, like you're making new workers for our society. So in a capitalist society, the way that it works is it works off the premise of growth, continuous growth. I always thought that that's eventually going to fail, but it could keep working because the universe is infinite, so we could keep expanding as human beings if we don't kill ourselves. So the premise is to grow. So even having kids is actually helping the production line. So a friend of mine was telling me that in the Second World War, the Nazis created something called Mother's Day because they wanted to encourage women to have more children, to grow up to be fighters for the Nazis. And that's the same as all countries. I'm not saying all countries are Nazis, but all countries have that philosophy, but we're not really conscious of it because we're sort of brought into it, we're born into it, and these ideologies are pumped into us, but we're not really conscious of them. So Mother's Day is a celebration of you producing kids that will grow up and work in this society, or create children to work for this society. A few thousand years ago, when we lived in smaller groups, you can imagine that that was really beautiful, to live in a smaller group and to produce children that would help support and grow and help the community. When you live in a bigger group like we do, it's a bit invisible and you're unconscious of it because it's so big, you're not really aware of these dynamics. But if you're in a smaller group, then like your work would be really important for the group and you really see the effects of your work. I think this would be something that's very empowering. In our society, we don't really see the effects of our work as such because we affect so many people, depending if you live in a big or small community. But often, like if you work for a big company, you don't see what your big company is doing. So one thing I love about working by myself, and I do predominantly all of this by myself, and I've purposely kept it like that. I do have somebody that helps me with organization. I have an accountant. I know somebody that helps me with that helps me with the internet if I get stuck. And so I do have some help, but I predominantly keep it really small and not into having lots of people working on it, because it completely changes things. So they say that what makes a really successful company is one where people feel like it's your family. So people feel like you're working for your family. So there was one idea that I was reading about where everybody had a stake in the company. So everyone has a stake in the company and you get paid dependent on how well the company does, and this is meant to improve the performance because people felt more connected to the outcome and they felt more like it was a family and a unit. And that's because that's where we came from. We work together as a group in order to survive. But now we live in such big societies that we can't quite see it like that. But that's the roots of our mind when we think about work. Like that's how our minds are set up. And it's important to understand these things. Like when I was younger, I had so many bizarre ideas about life and what we were as human. And it helped me, and I think it helps a lot of people to understand and have a more realistic view on what it is to be human and living in this society. A lot of our thoughts are based around survival. Even thoughts about getting on with the group is based around survival. So wanting to be liked and appreciated by people. This is part of survival, because if the group kicks you out, if you're no longer welcomed by the group, then there's a possibility by yourself you'll die, a big possibility. I mean, imagine living on the outside of society. I remember watching this interview with a homeless guy who used to be very successful, and he had his own business. He had a construction company. He had something like 30 people working for him, and it was so stressful that he ended up becoming addicted to cocaine because it was long hours and lots of work to be done. And from that addiction, he ended up doing a felony, and he ended up in prison. And when he came out of prison, he couldn't get any work, he couldn't get his life back. His whole family had turned their back on him, and he had no support. So he ended up living on the street. And his view very much was that he made this one mistake, and now he's kicked out of society, and he's no longer welcome by society. So he has to live on the fringes of society. So he scavenges out of bins. Like he's no longer welcome in mainstream society. So socially, we are unconsciously or consciously aware of this, and we seek to want to stay friends with the group, or we want to stay friends with the group, but often we're not aware of that. So we go into social situations, we're trying to make friends, we're trying to get on with people, and we're unconsciously running, like we're unconsciously behaving. We're not aware that we're wanting to be liked or appreciated, and that we're playing a game. And from not being aware, it just becomes important to us to get on with people. We're not even aware that we're wanting to get on with people. We're more aware of, or people are more aware of the thoughts that go along with it. So you start thinking, this person doesn't like me, they're such a bitch, this person does this person does that, I don't like this person, why does this person say this to me? And start running stories in their head. And really at the base of it, it's a fear of survival, it's a fear of being kicked out from the group. But then it manifests into a seeking energy, and then into repetitive thinking, and there is a getting lost in that mire, in that illusion of mind. And this is what's happening often in our situations, when we're in groups of friends, when we're with work colleagues. We constantly have this urge to get on with people, but we're not aware of that. The human is aware on the surface level of the thinking about who they like or who they don't like, or what somebody said to me, and the mind gets stuck in those thoughts. And that seeking energy, that separation, that limits your energy and makes you feel like you're inside the body. You're constantly thinking about yourself. You're in this story of you. It's not that the urge to get on with people has to go. That seems like a natural human urge. I know my dog wants to fit in with groups, and she has social behaviours. It's this unconsciousness of what's going on, so an ignorance to what you actually want, and then a seeking to complete something that you don't even know you're trying to complete. And then you just get lost, you get into a fog, and then you're moaning about someone, you're angry at someone, and your mind is spinning on that, but really at the base of it, you're a feeling of endangerment has been triggered, feeling endangered. It could be more complicated than that. It could also be a feeling of powerlessness, a feeling of lack of love. All these feelings get triggered, and all that needs to happen to stop the seeking is to acknowledge those feelings, just to come back to those feelings and acknowledge them. Acknowledge what it is you want. Like often you don't even know what you want, so you go into a restaurant, or you go into the local bar, or you go into the local cafe or the local hairdressers and acknowledge you want to get on with people. Just that acknowledgement is empowering. Rather than walking into the cafe or to the hairdressers and already telling negative stories about people to try to protect yourself, and your body's all tense, and it makes you feel like there's somebody in here having an experience that's moving in time, this constant repetition of your story, and it's uncomfortable. So you just acknowledge it, and you acknowledge, my survival feels threatened now. I want to be liked and appreciated. And as soon as you realize what you want, and there's nothing wrong with what you want, wanting to be liked and appreciated in a group is very natural. It's the unconsciousness of it, and then this seeking energy, this running energy that produces lots of stories, this agitation. That's the problem. So in our society, there is such a huge emphasis on producing something and being something to do with work. And this emphasis on it produces a lot of unconscious gains in the human. Judging people for what their work is, judging yourself, feeling like you always have to do something orientated towards work, feeling like you have to be successful, feeling powerless to your job, feeling stuck, not acknowledging what you want because you're afraid. You must have a job, you must produce money. Afraid to live more on the edge of life, like trying to be safe, but that safety maybe isn't safe as you think it is. Like what you've been taught as safe, going against your flow. And all of that happens unconsciously because you're not told by your society what their game is. You don't come out of the womb and as soon as you go to school and be like, we're going to condition you to want to work and think that the goal of life is working and being successful in the workforce. They don't say that, they just do it. They're not even conscious that they're doing it. But that's why you're going to the education system. That's what our education system's doing to us, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's just all unconsciously happening, and everybody ends up being confused and ends up seeking and getting more and more unhappy. Really, what our first acknowledgement to children should be, for teaching them language, is teaching them who they are. It's important to remember who you are, and that's home. That nothing in this life is going to get you home, but that doesn't help the production line. That might make the production line slower. Teaching that this is the priority in businesses, in choices. It will completely transform our society. It will happen one day. We will get to it. So the person is often walking around in confusion. The person often feels confused because it's unconscious of what it even wants. It's seeking unconsciously. It's seeking in all these complex areas, doing all these complex things, and all it wants to do is come home. So one part of what I do is working with the person on the human level to understand themselves a bit better. To understand what it is that they actually want. To understand when they're seeking, to understand the discomfort of feelings in the body. And then I also teach this energetic resonance, that isn't you. Who you are is this freedom, this infinite freedom. That nobody's experiencing this, that human isn't who you are. When the person is really tied up in knots, it feels so dense and contracted to the body. When it's really seeking, there is a huge contraction. It feels the chakras are all out of balance and it feels dense and heavy. But there's nobody in here. There's nobody having an experience. Or you could say there's everybody and everything having an experience. This is everything having an experience. Okay, we go to questions now. So if you want to call in, guess what? You have to have a headset with a little microphone in Skype, because otherwise it feeds back and it's not very comfortable for everyone else. I think part of the reason why people get so abusive on the internet and so rude to each other on the internet is because in their everyday life with the people they see, they can't say what's going on inside their head because of this survival thing, this fear of being kicked out of the group. They're not conscious of it. But on the internet, they can be anonymous, so they're like, woohoo! It's not a balance thing. I think it's a reaction to that suppression. I think that's why people get like it. Okay. Hey guys, lots of people on the internet. Hey Isabel. Hi Hannah. Hi Bia. Hi Cornia. Hi Isabel. Hi Adios. Hi Maria. Beth. Marcello. Diana. Renate. Diana. Visho. Hi Thomas. Chris. Emmy. Phyllis. Thomas. Fabian. Hannah. Okay.